Everyone, you're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is the daily briefing on combat operations from the Ukrainian front. Yesterday, a strike hit the Odessa bridge that runs through the settlement of Zatoka. The Russian army has been striking it repeatedly since 2022 without managing to bring it down, but this time it finally succeeded. A large volume of cargo passes through this railway line, and destroying it has been a Russian army objective since 2022. Ukrainian media also report that the Russian army is eyeing the bridges over Kiev, with a strike planning operation already underway. If this happens in the near future, it would obviously be a major problem for Kiev, since the city is divided by a huge river, and movement between districts happens daily across several bridges over the Dnipro. It's not hard to guess what destroying those bridges could lead to. For now, the Russian army is holding this card in reserve, but it's quite possible that if Ukraine attempts to strike the Crimean bridge, the Kiev bridges could come under fire as well. Strikes on the Odessa ports are also continuing, and Ukraine is suffering noticeable losses since maritime trade has effectively ground to a halt. The harvest is in full swing, and moving it out is now far harder. A lot depends on the bridge near the settlement of Mayaki. If that bridge is taken out, grain and other cargo would have to be routed to Romania via a very long detour, adding significant extra cost. So friends, today is August 2nd, and as usual we're summing up last month, July. And it was a record month, not just for this year, but the best month overall in 4 years. The Russian army's best pace was only seen in the first months, in spring 2022. From May 2022 through July 2026, last month turned out to be the record setter. Let's go through it in order. Much of the record month owes to the collapse of AFU positions in the north, which is also continuing into August. So Sumy region. I didn't expect any serious movement for the Russian army on the Shostka bridgehead, but there was. 2 settlements were taken here, Bachivsk and Mala Slobidka, plus a foothold was gained in another settlement, Ulanov. Overall, the numbers here are good. Combined, this advance amounts to around 30 square kilometers. For the Shostka direction, that's the best figures since activity picked up here. The outlook for August also looks good. If things go well, the Russian army could close the pocket between Ulanov and Mala Slobidka, which would add nearly 60 square kilometers. Quite possible this could happen in August. At the same time, the main Sumy bridgehead was a bit of a disappointment, since successes were expected there, but ended up being minimal. Kondrativka still hasn't been fully pressed. Fighting continues around Pisarivka without a breakthrough, and there's been little progress pushing the front deeper into the forest south of Ivolzhanske. What did succeed was finishing off Novosich. That's essentially it for the main Sumy bridgehead. On the other hand, there were successes on the Sumy direction from the east, a dash of more than 7 kilometers from the border, reaching and taking Mohoritsia. And now, as I showed you the day before yesterday, AFU units are on the verge of encirclement near Sadki, where there's a very large stronghold along with a number of smaller strongpoints in the forests. So overall, the eastern flank looks excellent. I didn't expect this result at all. I thought the most the Russian army might manage by the end of July was to reach Mohoritsia, and even that wasn't certain. Yet not only did they reach it, they took it. As for August prospects, on the main bridgehead I don't know. Things are difficult there, and no major results should be expected. Pisarivka might finally be pressed, and fighting for Kianitsia has already begun. But further east, there's a real chance of closing the Sadki pocket, adding roughly 60 square kilometers. Summing up July in Sumy region. Over the month, Seva grouping fighters took 4 settlements and 73 square kilometers of territory. Better than June, when Russian forces took 1 settlement and 56 square kilometers in Sumy region. Now to Kharkiv region. In July, Kharkiv region was simply extraordinary. This is where the main AFU collapse happened. Just look at it. Nobody expected a collapse of this scale, and it's essentially still ongoing. I didn't expect it either. There were signals that AFU positions were weakening here, but to this extent. To give you a sense of scale, the width of the Russian advance sector over the month is now almost 26 kilometers, with a depth of advance of 10 to 15 kilometers. The area of just this one sector taken in July is 235 square kilometers, plus 7 settlements taken on top of that. And the collapse is continuing here. Expect more good news in August too. At the same time, the Veliki Burluk direction also became active. The successes there are far more modest, of course, but still notable. An advance of around 9 kilometers from the border, and the formation of a tentacle now stretching toward linking up and encircling a large area to the north. A sector of nearly 350 square kilometers containing more than 20 settlements. Are there chances of encircling AFU forces here in August? Yes, though it's not guaranteed. It's a difficult task and some more work is needed. But as I said, the Seva grouping has exceeded every conceivable expectation. So who knows? Maybe August will bring something similar. Personally, though, I doubt August can repeat what happened here in July. Still, the numbers from this sector should remain solid. Beyond the collapse in the north, there were also successes elsewhere in Kharkiv region. Pockets were closed near Kolodyazne, and Petro-Ivanivka was taken. There was also movement on the Kupiansk direction. Kurilivka was finished off, and the zone of control was expanded in Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi. A large pocket near Novusinova was closed, and on the Borova direction, following the clearing of Luhansk region, Russian forces entered Kharkiv region on a broad front and took 4 settlements. Summing up July in Kharkiv region, Russian army control was extended over, note this, 14 settlements and 399.5 square kilometers of territory. So effectively 400 square kilometers were taken in Kharkiv region alone in July. That's 4 times better than June. And frankly, in June the entire front combined saw less territory taken per month than what was gained in Kharkiv region alone in July. Moving on to Donetsk region. There were good results here too, and the pickup in activity is clearly visible. Starting with Lyman, there was a stall here. Lyman was expected to be finished off in July, but it wasn't. AFU forces dug in, launching constant counterattacks from the wooded areas, including north of Lyman, so things are currently stuck there. On the Sloviansk direction, by contrast, it was quite an active month, even though less of this is reflected on the map than what's actually happening on the ground. I know for certain, from people on the ground, that Russian forces have already entered Mykolaiivka and fighting for the town has begun, though this isn't yet reflected on the map. In any case, from what is confirmed, Piskunivka was taken, the heights west of Kaleniki were taken, the forest north of that Dovhi Lis forest north of Rai Oleksandrivka was taken, Lipivka was taken, and the Russian army is expanding its zone of control beyond the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, currently just 5 kilometers from Kramatorsk. What's expected in August? Taking Starodubivka, and of course the start of full-scale fighting for Mykolaiivka. I'm quite confident we'll see that in August. One of the top successes of July, I'd call it second place, since first place clearly goes to the breakthrough in the north. Figures like 240 square kilometers taken in a single sector and 400 square kilometers across an entire region haven't been seen since spring 2022. So the northern breakthrough is unquestionably the most significant event of the month. Second place goes to the capture of Kostiantynivka. And not just the capture, but also the expansion of control north of the city toward Alexeyevo-Drushkivka, and to the west. The Russian army also entered Mykolaiivka and took the settlement of Stinky. Another important success. Over the course of July, the Russian army largely broke through the powerful fortified line covering Dobropilya from the south. Honestly, I didn't expect this either. Svitla, Chernikivka and part of Vodiane were taken. I thought the Russian army would get bogged down here for 3 or 4 months, but it broke through in almost a single month. Very little remains now, and I'm confident that in August the Russian army will finish the job and enter Dobropilya itself. On top of that, there's also the capture of the town of Belitske and the advance to the eastern outskirts of Dobropilya. Sources on the ground say fighting has already begun for footholds in the town itself, though this hasn't yet been confirmed by objective control footage. Summing up July in Donetsk region, Russian control was extended over 12 settlements and 222 square kilometers of territory. A noticeably better result than June, when the Russian army took under 130 square kilometers in Donetsk region. At the same time, Donetsk region also saw AFU activity, while in Sumy and Kharkiv regions, AFU gains were essentially zero. In Donetsk region, AFU forces were active on the Komar sector, where they recaptured Novokatska and 36 square kilometers of territory. Moving on to Dnipropetrovsk region, there was activity on the Mezhova direction. Movement began toward Rypol and Kolona Mezhova, plus footage emerged of Russian troops in Oleksandrivka, Kristoforivka and Volny. Though I should note the control, there is minimal to none. AFU units are also infiltrating behind Russian lines, and it's clear that Russian forces could, in principle, walk in there and even plant flags without resistance. The same applies in reverse on the Velika Mikhailivka direction, where Russian units are also making incursions. Novohyorhivka, for instance, was retaken in July, but Ivanivka and Herasimivka were lost. Overall, in July, the Russian army extended control over 4 settlements and 64 square kilometers in Dnipropetrovsk region, while AFU forces recaptured 2 settlements and 31 square kilometers. Despite a number of setbacks, the Russian army still performed considerably better here in July than in June. Where performance was weaker was Zaporizhzhia region, the weakest region of the month, with the Russian army actually ending up in the negative here. Everywhere else, Russian forces are in solid positive territory, but not in Zaporizhzhia. What did the Russian army manage to achieve? Almost nothing. There was footage from Blahodatne and Kopany, along with some restored control in the floodplains and minor improvements around Stepnohirsk. That's essentially the entire month. AFU forces, meanwhile, recaptured a large stretch of territory east of Stepnohirsk. In the end, the Russian side gained 19.5 square kilometers in Zaporizhzhia region over the month, while AFU forces gained 27, meaning the Russian army came out roughly 8 square kilometers net negative for the month in this region. That's admittedly unpleasant, but looking at the overall monthly result, the picture is still very impressive. Yes, AFU also had a record July this year, recapturing around 95 square kilometers. But everything is relative, and compared to the Russian side's success, that record looks like a drop in the bucket. Russian army control was extended over 2 cities, 38 settlements, and 821 square kilometers of territory. Here's the table for reference, a massive jump compared to the previous month, and compared to July of last year too, when 404 square kilometers were taken. As I said at the start, the 821 square kilometers taken by the Russian army in July is the best monthly result in terms of territorial gains since May 2022. Even netting out the area AFU forces recaptured, it's still a 4-year record. Bottom line, the month was outstanding, far exceeding expectations. It's unlikely August can repeat this result. I'll consider August a good month if it brings, say, 550 square kilometers of territory. But who knows, maybe the collapse in the north continues, and we see similar numbers again. Geopolitical bloc, Strait of Hormuz, Trump calls off strikes, turning to the Middle East. Late Saturday, US President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that he was calling off a planned attack on Iran, saying his decision came in response to requests from Iran and other Middle East countries to hold off any attack given that the perimeters of a deal had been agreed to, on condition the deal be concluded quickly. The move came just a day after US media had reported that Washington and Israel were preparing a bombing campaign against Iranian energy infrastructure, with the proposed targets reportedly including power plants and oil refineries, and officials also discussing cutting electricity across Tehran. According to Trump, the emerging agreement would include the immediate, complete and total opening of the Strait of Hormuz, along with an end to Iran's nuclear program. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reportedly called Trump on Saturday to urge de-escalation and a return to negotiations. On the Iranian side, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told his Saudi counterpart that any US or Israeli strike would be met with a proportionate response. And as of the latest reports, Tehran had not issued an immediate formal response to Trump's announcement. It's worth flagging for viewers. This is not the first time Trump has threatened or moved towards strikes on Iran, only to reverse course and return to talks. So this pause should be treated as provisional rather than a settled outcome. Sources on the ground and further statements from Tehran will need to confirm whether the reopening of Hormuz and the broader deal actually materialize in the coming days. That's all I have on the frontline situation for today.